Perfect.
What's going on, guys? It's Coach Gaglione here. This is another edition of the Powerlifting for the People podcast. I'm your host, Coach Gaglione, and we got round two with
Yeah.
Justin, Coastal MD. What's going on? How you doing?
Pretty good, John. Thank you so much for doing this again. I had a great time doing it last time with you, and I think we got to cover a lot of great stuff. So I'm looking to, expand on some points that we talked about, as well as touch some new topics also.
Excellent. So, yeah, at the time of this recording, I know we're into February now. I can't believe it.
Flying, man.
So, yeah, I know we wanted to kind of touch base like earlier in the year. Obviously, as you know, anyone that's listening knows that kind of the January time is when everyone wants to get healthy and fit and kind of set new goals for the year. So we wanted to kind of troubleshoot a little bit. Maybe you have some health goals in mind, maybe you have some performance in mind, and make kind of talk about like and just kind of discuss some strategies and give you, like you said, some actionable items as we were kind of discussing before the recording. And I think like it's very fitting. So a lot of times I don't know what the stats are, and I'm sure like we can kind of look it up. Maybe I did bad on my research, but I know like probably a really high percentage of people, like by the time February, March hits, those resolutions become like pipe dreams at some point. So, and I think I'm sure, and you could kind of speak to this, you maybe see in your practice and helping people. And I know sometimes I see it as a coach, hopefully it doesn't happen too often, but maybe you get some blood work done or you kind of get a checkup with your primary care. I know you're doing some primary care now, which you can get into. And I know with myself too, everyone's, really excited from like a powerlifting standpoint. Everyone's really excited to train when there's like a meet coming up or there's like kind of that short-term goal. And I think on your end, and you can speak to this, if there's maybe some blood markers that maybe are like wrong, people are going to be more likely to take action. But also, I think it's really good to kind of be proactive, and also you have short-term and long-term goals. Um, so like someone might come in, they kind of get some tests done and whatever, and then maybe they do stuff, maybe they don't. So when people kind of come in and obviously you get that information, maybe you kind of see that someone needs to start to make some changes. Is there anything that you do to kind of help, I guess, with compliance or to kind of make sure people kind of stay on track, like on your
Absolutely.
end? Like what are some things that come to mind with that?
Yeah, I think we're gonna have a similar philosophy to this one actually. You being a coach and me in medicine, because a lot of compliance comes from follow-up and consistency, right? So a lot of what we do, which is very different from most doctors' offices, is that we're on average seeing our patients once a week. The least that I see my patients would be once a month. And even still, that's 12 times a year, which a regular PCP or a specialist, you're seeing them maybe twice a year, maybe three times a year. So it leaves a lot of time for things to fall off. And the analogy I use with my patients sometimes is like, everybody goes to the dentist, but it's like the day before where you start flossing, um, right? So we try to be really proactive with that by staying on top of them, but in a way in which it's supportive as opposed to punitive, because that helps build them up and it becomes more exciting, right? And I know that's what we'll touch on a little bit is how do you build off of that, to continue to get progress even when you don't have a meet or an immediate goal in mind, right?
Yeah. I think and that's something that I'm kind of like learning, now like well or I guess kind of re-emphasizing to, like a lot of the people in New York right now, I'm kind of training mostly them remotely, kind of coaching remotely. So I think the people that really stay on track are the people that I communicate more regularly with. And that's something where, some people they love training and they're going to kind of do it, regardless. And then other people, it's more exercise, it's more like medicine, and they kind of
Yep.
just take it like because they know they need to do it. But I think when you really want to make change, having a more consistent communication and starting to kind of like look at certain things. So like even if someone is just kind of an example, like I'll give kind of in the coaching world, especially when it comes to like the remote and kind of online component.
Mhm.
So, like what we will do with a lot of our members that I don't get to see like all the time, especially now that's kind of a good portion of them. They're going to kind of post their top sets, kind of their main exercises. They're going to post a video. The really good ones might let me know how they're feeling, how it felt. They might add some notes. But at the very least, they're going to kind of record, maybe a couple of times a week. They're going to check in with me. That way I'm kind of communicating with them, a few times like during the week. So if
Yeah.
they work out 3 or 4 times a week, they may take, a couple of videos. Someone that's newer may take more. But at least I can kind of see like what's their kind of primary exercise that they're kind of trying to focus on. And then we're getting that back and forth. Now, on the flip side, if other people that are not as consistent, maybe like they check in once a month or they check in at the end of a program, and that may be, be fine and dandy. But then when something is kind of wrong, so same thing, like if you're only doing like blood work like once a year or whatever, and you
Yep.
can't see that, that consistent trends, it can be a little bit harder to make the right decision. So if I could see someone's training, over the course of several weeks and several months, I can kind of maybe pinpoint, okay, maybe you were stressed out here, you didn't get enough sleep here, diet kind
Yep.
of fell off track here. You started to get some aches and pains in your lower back around
Yep.
this time. Your form is a little, so then we can at least kind of go backwards and kind of reverse engineer and then kind of figure out, okay, this is what happened. And then kind of start to actually take some actionable steps to like reversing and troubleshooting the problems. That's kind of like where I think a lot of people in like the powerlifting space, and same thing, like we talked about last time, like, you get like these clinics that have very generic prescriptions. Everyone's on this dose. And then it's kind of like, then we'll kind of figure it out as
Yep.
opposed to like actually trying to see, okay, well, how is this person responding? And this is kind of like, how is this person responding to the training? And then
Yeah.
we can start to kind of tweak, the volume and the intensity, and we kind of tweak the exercise selection, just like you guys would kind of tweak the doses and stuff like that. So, in terms of like how you're communicating to people, and I know like for me, um it's hard sometimes, like as opposed to just harping on what's wrong, I also try
Yep.
to communicate, okay, these are the things that like look good, and try to give them, like a little bit of like a win and kind of start things off on a positive note. And then we could say, and I'm not always perfect with this, but I try to like, okay, this looks, you're doing these things really well. This is like kind of the one big thing that we want to fix. And I try to focus on like one thing at a time.
Yep.
Do you have like any I guess commonalities or kind of anything that kind of mirrors like when you're like kind of, following up with your patients and kind of when you're
Yeah, what I was going to say actually, just listening to you and being, somewhat of an outsider looking into, your industry and more specifically into, your gym and your coaching, what you're doing with all these touch points, right? Like you just described so many touch points, not just where you're like checking in and communicating with them, but you're also tracking, data on their lifts and their progress. And, it's not like you just said, it's not once a year. You're talking to them 2, 3, 4 times a week throughout their training, and that really sets you apart from a lot of other people. I think that's great. Whenever you could use data and other information to fuel your coaching and your decision making, that's huge. I mean, I wish I had more of that as far as like a day to day progress on people, right? I do have certain patients, like specifically my weight loss. I give them very specific goals, and I usually start very light, which is walk a mile additional, right? Like don't just use your step counter, go out for a walk 2 to 3 times this week, right? And I'm going to see you in a week, and you're going to, let me know how you did with that. I will say we see it more in the primary care space. Like you mentioned, we started doing some more primary care. And we were actually able to find a doctor who is fellowship trained in integrative medicine. So it does offer that alternative perspective on medicine, which is great. But like there's devices out there now that we're utilizing that will report blood pressures to us, remotely. That will also report heart rates as well as any rhythm abnormalities too. And I know like that's a bit of a separate conversation, but from more of a goal setting and sticking to a routine and a plan, a lot of it is the face to face for us, right? Because what we've learned is like when you go to these other doctors, you go to these other medical practices, even the generic ones that you were just mentioning, they're not getting to know the patient as well as we do, right? Because we could be having a normal conversation about what they did over the weekend or how their training was going or what they liked about it, what they didn't. And then we start to uncover more about who they are and what's really going to appeal to them. So, with that extra information and that, just the listening that we do on the appointments helps us paint a better picture of how this person is going to respond and what they're going to respond to, right? Because the same plan is not going to work for patient A as it is going to be for patient B. So it's our job to really sit back, listen, determine their lifestyle. Something that I'm doing for this year, we have something called the Vitality Voyage, which we're rolling out, and it's basically like a treatment plan similar to what you're talking about, in which we piece together specific treatments that we are going to get them to their goal, right, which is their true north. But we're working on these basically these buckets in which patients kind of fall into, right? Because you see it in your gym, I'm sure. You get the people who are just starting out, all the way to the professionals that are at the highest tier of their training and their competition. And then you get the people who are weekend warriors with it, and they do it for a short time. And then you get the people where it's ride or die, and they're doing this for life, right? So you probably speak to them slightly different depending on where they're at, correct? And you take certain things in, right?
Yeah, well, I think one of the things I think it's important that people, like you talked about, like the idea of like this like true north. So I think like understanding also not only the goal, but like why is this goal
Yep.
important to you? So like I know like for um especially even myself kind of focusing more on family and like kind of this kind of stage of my life and things like that. I think that a lot of our members, while they still may have competitive goals and they still might want to be doing competitions and things like that, we have a lot of, parents and kind of family men and,
Yep.
husbands and wives and stuff. So you're not only trying to like kind of be strong and fit for yourself or for a
Yep.
competition, but also maybe be a role model for your kids, maybe be strong for your spouse.
Yep.
You want to kind of be around for them. So I think when you kind of again have those conversations, you're going to kind of get to know people a little bit better. I think having that as like an anchor point, especially
Yep.
when things kind of get kind of challenging, and you can kind of always go back to that. And I think that's huge. And I know like for
Yeah.
myself, that's kind of a driving factor. Even like I said, this is kind of the first time since in a really long time. So like 2011 actually was the only year that I did not compete in something in some strength
Yeah.
sport. Was when I first opened up, uh, the business officially, and I've always had something. And this is like kind of the first time I'm not like signed up for anything. I don't have anything on the horizon. So more than ever, it's like okay, I don't, like I still got to get to the gym. I still got to kind of work
Yep.
towards something. I still got to be healthy for the family. So
Yeah.
I wanted to kind of segue. We talked a little bit about like weight, starting to allude to weight loss and stuff. So obviously, kind of weight management and just like weighing in and
Yeah.
finding your healthy body weight is kind of a really big like um I don't know what the percentage would be, but I'm sure a very high percentage for New Year's resolutions, kind of going into the new year. There's usually some sort of like fitness or weight
Yep.
loss, kind of weight management component. And there might be some people that want to add muscle. There might be some people that want to get bigger, but I think for most people, regardless of if it's adding muscle, losing fat, or some combination, they want to improve their body composition in some way.
Yep.
Um, so I think obviously, the first kind of order of business is kind of figuring out again, like what's the goal, and
Hmm.
then kind of starting to figure out like some actionable items kind of go.
Yeah.
So with your patients, do you try to figure out like a body fat percentage or a scale number or some combination? Obviously, it's like depends on the person, but because I know like with myself, sometimes um depending on like if it's an athlete or whatever, like if an athlete might have to be in a certain within a certain weight class or
Yep.
whatever. But with your general population, let's say someone you feel like has 50 pounds to lose. What does that kind of conversation look like, especially if it's like a bigger number and like kind of that can be really daunting. So what's like, I guess the first how does that conversation like
Yeah.
look like and how does that
Of
like
course. Now, most of the time the patients are coming to us, and they're looking to us as their resource, right? Because, of the success that we've had so far with some of these patients. They're going to come and be like, listen, they'll speak very generally, right? Like, hey, listen, I'm looking to lose 50 pounds. And then that's where we kind of tease out, all right, what's your day to day look like? What do you do for work? What's your sleep habits? I mean, I treat I want to say predominantly because it does feel that shift workers,
yeah.
people who are doing overnights, 20, 16 plus hour shifts, 4 or 5 days a week, all these external factors coming in, right? So I need to paint that picture of really like where do they have free time? What's attributing to this weight gain, right? Are they just sedentary or Are they under an immense amount of stress between home life and work? And that will help me better tailor what I need to do. So what I always start off with is, that detailed description of what a week looks like for them. And then I ask that, if they're fasting, we're going to do some fasting blood work right off the bat, right? I want to see if there's anything metabolically going on that is also attributing to that, whether it's hormone levels. As you know, we check, testosterone, free testosterone, DHT, DHEA, estradiol, all of these that can contribute to weight gain easily. Thyroid panel as well. We check a bunch of different vitamins and organ function. Do they have a component of fatty liver disease? So we'll usually get that. We'll follow up with them in a week and we'll go line by line for them with any of the abnormalities that are there with recommendations on how to fix that, right? So say somebody comes back and let's just say for all intents and purposes for this conversation, all their lab values are pretty normal. Their cholesterol is high. Their A1C will maybe be pre-diabetic, right? That's your 3-month average of your blood sugar. So you can't cheat that whether you're fasting or not. Because sometimes people are like, oh, I ate right before. It's like, well, no, this is like the past 90 days. This is like not just a snapshot. This is a recap, if you will. And that usually gives us a good insight to maybe there's some insulin resistance going on, right? That term's being thrown around a lot right now. And it's something that we definitely need to look at because that is something that, you want to address now because in 5-10 years, that's when it's going to really be the problem, whether it's diabetes, Alzheimer's, cardiovascular disease. This is the time to fix it, right? So let's say they're pre-diabetic, the cholesterol's a little high, hormones are fine, right? Thyroid's okay, testosterone numbers are all right. We're going to have to really dig deeper into, all right, tell me what your portion sizes are, right? And we are going to do some nutritional counseling with that, as well as offering them a lot of the lifestyle modifications, right? So I'm sure everybody's heard of, the Ozempic craze or the semaglutide craze. I have a very strong feeling for them. I've been prescribing these medications, not Ozempic specifically, but more so Saxenda, which is in the same class. It's a GLP-1 for the last 6 years. These medications change people's lives. And John, the point I really want to drive home in the discussion that I have with these people during this conversation is you need to change the way that you look at obesity, right? Or being overweight. It is a primary disease. If you look at it as the primary disease and then everything else, osteoarthritis, diabetes, prediabetes, cardiovascular, those are all secondary diseases. If you're doing everything you can to cure and fix that primary disease, your longevity is going to improve, your overall health, your energy level, your relationships in your life, they're all going to go up because you're going to be feeling so much better. So I usually do like those, like you just said, if somebody has 30 plus pounds to lose, I'm usually going to offer them as a good adjunct because what we need to do is we need to change their lifestyle, right? That's probably what it is. And I'm sure you've seen it before too, people just starting out. They need some sort of kickstart, right? And what these medications help do is teach them what healthy portion sizes are looking, right? They get rid of those additional cravings that some people stress eat. I mean, I see it all the time. They're working, like I said, 16 plus hours. They're not reaching for a healthy alternative. They're stressed out. They're going to grab whatever is convenient. That's not their fault. If you look back at evolution, when you're stressed, your body's craving the fattiest, saltiest thing that's going to help you survive, right? And not only that, when you're stressed, your body's going to hold on to that fat, right? So that's why I let them know this is going to be a several month process because the big thing that I want to talk about and understand is when somebody is overweight or obese and they start losing that weight, they're doing great. The way that we're hardwired evolutionary is our body's going to want to maintain that weight. So let's say somebody's 250, they want to be 200, they get down to their goal. Their body that entire time is going to be telling them, whoa, 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 what's going on? Fight or flight mode's kicking in. We got to get back to that 250. Even though you're happy, you're content, that's how the brain works. And it thinks that it's almost starving, even though you're really where you should appropriately be. And that's because a lot of this weight gain takes years, right? That a lot of these people, it's years and years of compounding bad habits, poor diet choices, minimal physical activity, right? And we need an ample amount of time to fix that too. And it's retraining the brain, it's reinstilling healthy lifestyle modification that we could have, such as going outside for walks, taking the dog for a walk, getting some sun on your face, doing an exercise, doing strength training as well as cardio, mixing it up. All these things need to go into that. And that, like you said, once you know where their goal is, they come in saying 50 pounds. Now I know everything I need to do to backfill to get you to that goal and then keep you there past that. So,
So you kind of touched on a couple of things. I want to we kind of like jumped on the Ozempic semi
yeah, yeah,
talk already, which is fine because I think it is a hot topic and people see it's in like the mainstream media. It's like all the Hollywood actors and actresses and all this stuff. So I think it's wasn't the turn that I was expecting, but I think
yeah,
it's pertinent and it's important. So, and I know it's even something that like my dad is asked about and things like that. And I'm sure like everyone, everyone's kind of, so I think number one, maybe if you can give a quick synopsis of like for the lay person, what the GLP, you know,
yeah,
classification of drugs, what does it actually do? And then, this is kind of like coming from me and you can maybe touch on it. So number one, what do they do? And then my other kind of, I guess, if I have a concern or not. So, my understanding is that they're going to kind of help regulate your appetite and you can kind of maybe get into the specific mechanisms. So, like you kind of mentioned before, so okay, like we want to know like what are these drugs actually doing to us, and then my kind of I guess the caution that I would say, obviously you're going to be working with people, which is great. If someone was
yeah,
just to take these drugs and not have any counseling, my fear would be okay, like I'm just going to reduce calories and not like hit my
yep,
nutritional requirements, my protein requirements. So that's kind of I think a nice segue of like kind of
yep,
okay, this is the kickstart. This is going to help kind of get the ball rolling. But then what do I need to do to actually keep the
yep.
ball rolling and make sure I'm kind of heading in the right direction and not, I don't want to have so much momentum that I run off a cliff and I go like the wrong
Yeah.
direction. So
Yeah.
so
So yeah, just some quick
construct.
history. So GLP-1 glucagon-like peptide, it's been around for a while. It was originally invented for diabetes medication. One of the side effects that they found was weight loss was associated with it. So there's been spin-offs of it. There's weekly medications. There's daily medications. And the way that these medications work is really with the satiety center in the brain and how you process being hungry, right? So the hunger hormone will usually be around for 20 to 40 minutes, let's just say the half-life. That's why in the example I tell all my patients to really make this digestible is you're at Thanksgiving dinner. You have a huge meal for Thanksgiving. 20, 30 minutes go by, they start putting the pies out, they start putting the cookies out, all that type of stuff. And you go, oh, you know what? I could actually have, I'll take a sliver of pie or I'll take a cookie, but like 20 minutes ago, you were about to throw up because your stomach was in your throat, right? But that's because that hormone that's telling you you're hungry is being suppressed, right, with the distension of the stomach, and it's sending hormones to the brain saying, yeah, we're good, we don't need any more food, but it goes away too quickly. So what this does is it prolongs that to hours to days, right? So that doesn't go, so they don't get really hungry anymore, right? And the biggest thing that I see is people like with a lot of their snacking completely takes it off the table, right? There is a small increase in insulin, which does help with some of that insulin resistance as well too. So there's a couple of different mechanisms in which the way the medications work, but the reason why I like them so much is, and what I want to talk to you more about is, yeah, how do we talk about maintaining a healthy caloric deficit, but also getting the right macros, getting the right protein and other nutrients in their diet, right? And that's why we see them, like I said, at least once a month, right? So the medication is meant to be, it's not a crutch. It's meant to be a great adjunct to what they're doing. But the way they're going to stay healthy and keep it off is everything else that we're doing, the education component, the deeper dives into their nutrition. But this medication is jumpstarting that process. And then honestly, subconsciously teaching them what a healthy portion size is, right? Because what they'll do is they'll start eating and say, like, I just had it yesterday. One of my new patients, he's like, Justin, I love steak. And I'm like, I'm going out to a steakhouse. I'm going to eat the whole thing. And I'm like, yes, but you're going to learn, in talking to me that you're only going to need a quarter to a half of that steak to actually, meet your nutritional requirements and get you to where you want to be. So it takes time, but it's that reinforcement, going on subliminally to them that's actually better instilling healthier eating habits, right? Because they also are not craving the processed foods as much. They're not craving, McDonald's or M&M snacks that they would normally have around the office, the donuts. Those are the real killers for the general population when it comes to their, constant struggle with obesity, So,
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. And I think like I know like I've always I've always kind of been against like just I try to I guess I just want to phrase this the right way. I've always cautioned people to like, especially that are really trying to make changes to I
yeah,
like focus on meals, not snacks,
yep,
because
yep,
people, and if there are certain type of food that you just kind of enjoy, like you said, you have a portion of it. So a lot of this is just kind of understanding your habits and stuff. But if you're just kind of picking,
yep,
or if you are, and the other thing that especially as a lot of my audience is weightlifters, powerlifters, strength athletes, to be like protein focused. And I think also too, if you are kind of hitting your protein requirement, you're eating nutrient dense foods. um I actually just did, this is just like an aside, but for this past month I did like a little bit of a reset myself, and I mostly, I'd say like 95% of what I ate was just meat, just lean meats
yeah,
and some fattier meats and fruit. And I
yep,
tried to like just not have, I just didn't have a lot of starch and things like that.
yeah.
um and
And how'd you feel?
and well, I got rid of like a lot of bloating, some excess weight. So, and I kind of went a little bit off the wagon. I'm human during the holidays. And so a lot of that like water weight, some of the inflammation, it's all gone.
Yeah,
Now I'm going to transition to a little bit more of like I'd say a normal balanced kind of diet. But I found that, getting a lot of the, nutrition from like the plant foods, the fruit, also like some of the sweetness, kind of just to kind of, kind of like a little sweet treat,
yep,
from the fruit. Also, as another aside, I think, when you're not eating processed foods and you actually eat like, it's like, wow, this like, this kiwi is delicious. And it's,
yeah,
and so you appreciate like the natural sweetness for things when you
yes,
start to kind of eliminate a lot of that junk. And then also like when you're eating, like if you're eating a couple ounces of nutrient dense meat. I was eating some bison and some different things. I was trying some different stuff in the plan, and you feel very
very good.
satisfied when you actually give your body like what it needs. And
Yeah,
that's something where it doesn't need to necessarily need to be like egg whites and tilapia, and and that stuff is fine. But if it's very bland, or if it's not
yeah,
like a lot of micronutrition. So I think part of it like has to do with education, and also
yep,
kind of figuring out like what thing what people what foods people like enjoy. But yeah, I guess what my kind of point is, I think it's really important that we're not just kind of jumping the gun too soon. So one of the things
yep,
that I want to kind of lead into, where it's like, keeping the momentum going. So like I think a lot of people, like, let's say they maybe start this weight loss drug, they don't have like the guidance of like someone like yourself, and they're starting with too big a calorie deficit like too soon, right?
yep,
And they're
yep,
losing a lot of weight. And then, like you said, the cravings kind of come on, and they want to kind of come back to like, they kind of jump back up to, maybe they get off the medication. So when people are kind of starting out and we're kind of monitoring, maybe we're kind of weighing people in, like what is like a healthy amount of weight loss that you should, like what is too much? What is kind of a good amount? Is there like a percentage that you like to see that's kind of safe and kind of sustainable? In your,
yeah. It's a great question, and I will say it varies a little bit for me because the larger the amount of weight somebody has to lose, the easier it's going to come off when they actually start following. I'm not medications aside, they
yeah,
start doing the right habitual things on a daily basis. they're going to lose the weight much quicker than say somebody who has 20 or less pounds to lose. And it really is patient specific because, with these medications, I'm talking, general population, right? If we wanted to hone the conversation into, power lifters or just athletic individuals who are still working out quite frequently, that wouldn't be a first line for me. It would be more so, let's look at recovery, right? Let's look at how your body's functioning. Let's dissect your diet probably a little bit more, and maybe somewhere else that we could tweak or switch up either your recovery regimen or your training regimen to focus towards a different goal, right? So just generally speaking, I don't like my patients, medications aside, let's take them out, right? And then I'll talk about them as well too. Medications aside, if they're losing a pound a week, 3 to 4 pounds a month, I'm happy with that. That's a healthy weight loss, right? Because that effect that I was talking about earlier, where our brain's hardwired to want to stay at a certain weight, the faster you lose that, the more the body panics and says, hey, whoa, 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 why are we losing so much weight right now? I need to get back to that weight. So it's going to be a harder struggle. So with a gradual weight loss, you're actually going to have a better success rate of keeping that weight off. Now, the big thing that I want to caution with the medications, and the reason why I'm so passionate about them in a positive way, is because of how we handle them and do them the right way. I've heard horror stories of, people getting pancreatitis, terrible constipation. These are all things that, can get you into the hospital and really ruin some perfect health when you're just trying to lose a minimal amount of weight. It's not necessary. Plus, the people who don't really have the appropriate amount of weight to lose, meaning like for me, 25, 30 plus pounds, they're gonna gain that back quicker because they're not gonna stay on it long enough. They're not gonna instill the right habits into their life. So with the medication, I do allow for a higher amount of weight to be lost in a certain amount of time. Say, let's take the example that you mentioned before, somebody who needs to lose 50 pounds. I wouldn't be surprised if they lost between 4 and 10 pounds that first month, which I'm okay with as long as they're doing it the right way, right? And one of the biggest things that we need to touch on and talk about is the muscle wasting and the frailness that is associated with these GLP-1s. And really, my viewpoint on it is what you were just saying. There's people out there that aren't getting the proper medical following, and they're not changing their life at all, right? So the reason why I like these medications, and I know we have some crossover in our patient population, right? The people at your gym and who come to my practice, I see a very active and generally healthy clientele. It's an adjunct to what they're doing, right? But with these medications, the stigma broadly is that, oh, they're just taking the medication and they're not changing anything. They need to be lifting weights. They need to be in the gym. They need to be taking in the right protein and the right nutrients in their diet. Because what I do with my patients is same patient as before. Once they get down about 30, 35 pounds, I usually have them predominantly cardio based with some strength training. But as soon as they get within 20 pounds of their goal or so, I switch it the other way around. I scale back on the cardio and I say, listen, you really need to be doing a lot right now to convert a lot of this into muscle, build the healthy muscle because you could overshoot, right? And then that's when people are looking frail, they're looking sick, right? And now it's going to be even more difficult for you, the way your metabolism is working, to get to where you need to be with the appropriate muscle mass, right? So, in my opinion, yeah, if you're not changing anything, you're gonna look frail from it because you're not helping build any muscle. Now you're becoming disproportionate to how you were before. That's a very, very big misconception that I get is like, oh, if I take this, am I going to lose all my muscle mass? Well, yeah, if you're not training the right way and you're not eating the right protein and putting the right work in at the gym, then yeah, that's going to happen. But if you train smart and you have the right medical supervision around you, plus the right coaches around you too, you're going to get proper results. So.
So I think kind of circles back to like one of the first things that you were kind of mentioning is like having like what does your week look like? So if they're not regularly strength training, if they're not like say like having the habit of having some lean protein at each, feeding, that sort of thing, if they're
Yeah.
like they're snacking on processed food. So if we have this information ahead of time, we can kind of start to kind of attack these things like one at a time. Now, I
Yep.
think what the trick is, and this is something where, again, I don't remember if we ever talked about it, but I have like a checklist for like weight loss and stuff. And so one of the things that I like to do with this checklist, and I'll just kind of go off the top of my head. So like it's kind of to hit like a daily minimum for certain factors. So,
Okay.
we're gonna look at your sleep, we're gonna look at your hydration, we're gonna look at like your nutritional intake, but I actually keep your food and your protein requirement even separate just because I'm very big into the strength and muscle building and stuff. But obviously,
Of
protein
course.
and food are kind of tied together. We talked about like you talked about like walking and stuff. So like I think step count is a really good thing to like look
Yep.
at just to kind of what's your non-exercise activity thermogenesis, like what's your general activity like throughout the day? Are you sedentary? Are you more active? And then the other thing, which we touched on a little bit, and then we kind of went down the weight
Yeah.
loss drug rabbit hole, which is fine, is that taking inventory of your weight. And one of the things that I like to encourage a more frequent weigh-in. But for the people that weigh in daily, I think you want to zoom out and look at like what's like the weekly like average. So like you mentioned before, because you're gonna have those fluctuations based on water and sodium
Yep.
and things and stress. We talked about how that
Yes.
can like wreak havoc on things, right?
Yeah.
People don't like if you're a shift worker, or if you're a new dad or a new mom.
Yep.
So the thing what I like to do is first is take inventory of all these things, and then whatever you feel like as the coach or the practitioner, like this is gonna like I like to look at, and you can kind of maybe touch on this, like what's gonna be like the most impactful, but also is there like maybe not friction free, but what's going to be like a task or a habit that's going to be the least amount of friction to get them a
Yep.
win. So what
Yep.
is like one move we can kind of make? What's one dial we can kind of turn that's not going to require like a ton? We don't maybe the diet requires a lot of work right now. Maybe they have no idea how to strength train. So some things may take a little bit more time. So in your practice, and I can kind of speak on mine, like how do you know like which things to like attack first, and then like obviously a
Which
lot of
levers to pull?
it is which lever would you pull first in your experience? Like do you look at recovery first? Do you have like, or is it kind of person, like how do you kind of determine that for
Yeah,
you?
so you kind of just answered it too. It is patient specific, right? Because you could have an individual who's training hard, but maybe has something metabolically going on and their training is great, or you have somebody sedentary where everything's wrong. They're not training, they're not eating right. But the easiest thing and the thing that I always attack first is sugar, right? So sugar is really the killer here. It's addictive, and I have no problem with salt, right? People talk about, oh, how are we doing with our diet? I have to be, should I be as concerned about sometimes salt as I am about sugar? No. The picture that I sometimes paint to people, especially the pre-diabetics, is you could almost think of sugar as like a sandblaster through your veins, right? So what that does is it's creating these tiny, tiny, tiny little micro cuts throughout your arteries and your capillary beds, and over time those start to scar and fill in, right? Where salt, if you have healthy renal function, which would be in the blood work that we run, we could counteract that with fluids. So I always address their sugar intake first, because a lot of times people don't even know the amount of sugar that they're taking in on a daily basis, right? And it goes back to something that I was taught, learning specifically about weight loss, was what do we do as children? We even like infants, you're grabbing anything and you put it in your mouth, right? They're curious, they're learning, but then you're a toddler, and this motion your brain doesn't even think about sometimes. So we'll like when you look at like the food diary, let's say, if they're keeping track of what they're eating, they'd be like, "Oh my God, I didn't even realize that I was grabbing, like a handful of M&Ms every time I went to the bathroom in the office or something like that." So sugar is always the first thing, because people also are not always big on hydration, which I would say is a close second. Your body's going to function better when you're adequately hydrated. And I know one of the things you wanted to talk about was IVs and stuff like that too. But the general population is not drinking enough water on a regular basis. So one is definitely sugar. It's the easiest thing to address. I know it may be difficult to break, but it's the elephant in the room. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, so I'm nodding my head, and so the first thing I'll just say, and then I'll kind of share my personal experience, just obviously being, again, for people that are listening for the
Yep.
first time. I was 340 pounds for a portion of my life. I was over 300 pounds for a good chunk of my adult life. So I'm no stranger to eating processed food and, kind of, all these, and, like I said, I was obese, I was metabolically unhealthy, inflamed. And so I get it. So I
Yep.
understand, I've lived it. And so sometimes people, and so one of the things that I take issue with, there's, kind of a sector of like these trainers and stuff. And, some of them maybe be evidence based. And one of the things that like, um, I kind of struggle with sometimes is, they might cherry pick some data or use some data or some scientific literature, and a lot of things like, well, equate calories, sugar doesn't matter. When we equate calories, processed foods don't matter, and all this stuff. But the thing is, like, when we can control things in a vacuum, sure, but like in real
Yeah.
life, when I reach for the M&Ms, what what effect is that going to cause down the road? So, like for me, one of my buddies, I don't remember, Mark Bell and Chris Bell, they would say like, carbs beget carbs. So like the idea is like, and when we say carbs, a lot of times we're not necessarily talking about potatoes and fruit with fiber and whole foods. We were talking about things that are, maybe your cakes and things that are like highly processed, a lot of like, a lot of sugar, like you said. And what ends up happening is that you get this like, this response where it feels really good. You get this kind of, blood sugar,
Dopamine high.
you get this high, and then you get this crash. And then, which, again, if you had something, you might have sugar with like the fruit, but it has cofactors, it has fiber, there's other things that are going to kind of slow it down.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, so that's the thing where we kind of like, yes, can you have, and again, my fiance is great. Sometimes she could have like a piece of chocolate, whatever. So also kind of understanding the person. And again, you may know better than
Yep.
me. It's kind of like my belief. I happen to have a very big appetite. Now, whether that was nature or nurture or some combination, um, I have a very hard time having like one cookie. I have a very hard time. Now, I'm sure you can kind of train that. So I
Yeah.
agree. I think that if you're someone that is like struggling and you need to make a change, I
Yeah.
think it's not to say, hey, it's not to say you can never have cake again or whatever, but I think for a period of time, you may need to abstain just to kind of like get everything working properly again. And I
Yep.
think that the approach that I like to take personally is, as opposed to thinking about like, okay, I'm giving this stuff up, but like, okay, well, can I add something in that I still enjoy? Kind of
Yeah.
fill your cup with like kind of good stuff that is going to kind of meet your needs. So yeah, I'm with you. I really think that you have to think about, it's not necessarily like the food itself, and people talk about the poison makes the dose and all this stuff, but
Yeah.
at the end of the day, you have to like, and where when you keep a food journal, one of the things I like, what happened, like we talked about with training, when something goes wrong, it's not necessarily like, okay, this deadlift hurt my lower back.
Yep.
What were all the events leading up to that tweak that happened? Did you like not have enough sleep? Were you stressed? Did you have a fight with your girlfriend? Was it the
Yep.
deadlift that hurt your back, or was it all these other little things? And this was just the
Yep.
one event. So the sugar, in my opinion, can be like create a cascade of like a lot of other negative actions, and
Yep.
then you again, momentum can be positive or negative. So
Yep.
um
I
that's
I completely agree. And I have 2 points that I want to make. And thank you for bringing it up too, because I think we're on the same page. Even with the sugar, just as a whole, yes, there's a big difference between processed sugars, right? And then what you were doing with the fruits, right? So I'm a big advocate of berries. I think healthy, natural sugars are obviously always great. But usually in these conversations, it's not them eating raspberries, blueberries, and stuff like that. It's the cakes and the cookies and the things like that that you were just mentioning. So thank you for really bringing light to that, because that is something that is very true. And the second piece to that is, during these conversations, what I want to do, and what I want the listeners to understand too, is this has to fit your lifestyle, right? So like, if you have a really bad sweet tooth, you're right. Like, yeah, you need to keep away from it. But if I could get you to have this big of a piece of cake as opposed to this big of a piece of cake to start off, we're moving in the right direction, right? And in my experience, a large part of most of the population's issues is tied to portion size, right? So like, if you're gonna go on one of these fad diets, which I'm so against, like where they're eating bars and whatever, that's not sustainable to your daily life. You're not gonna stick to that. So you got to do something where there's a little give and take. And I think it comes back to compromise, right? Consistency and compromise are what going to get you to your goal. So if I can get you to have one slice of pizza instead of three slices of pizza when you have it once a month or once a week, whatever, you're already in a better position than you were before we started. Right. So that was the other thing that I wanted to mention that you were getting at as well too, because you could have the best weight loss routine and
Yeah.
paint somebody the perfect lifestyle, but if it doesn't fit into their stress level at home, like I just had my second son, so there's not a lot of sleep in the house right now, so what I'm doing to stay fit and just to stay mentally sane too is I'm doing 20-minute workouts. I'm doing 20-minute full body workouts. It's all I have between work and being up all night because I can't get underneath some serious weight because I'm just not fully there mentally. And like you just said, if you're not there mentally, then it could affect you physically without a doubt, especially in your training. I'm sure you see it all the time.
Yeah, so I want to kind of highlight a couple of things, and again, we'll probably have to do a part three because I don't
Yeah.
want to take up too much more of your time. But this has been great. I think especially this last section is going to be really helpful. So, a
Yeah.
couple of things I wanted to highlight is number one, like kind of once you have your goal, I think whether it's your practitioner, your coach, some combination, it is good to like look at like what is your day to day look like, and then kind of like go hour by hour, and then kind of look at all these things. So we're kind of both in agreement. Not just your nutrition, not just your exercise, but what's your stress look like, what's your sleep look like,
Yes.
what your hydration look like,
Yep.
um, you know, all these little things. So
Yeah. Yeah.
write it out. Actually, physically write it out. Have a conversation with people, and then from there you can start to kind of figure out and have this back and forth conversation. But you want to think about like again low friction things that you can kind of do
Yep.
to move the needle. I think is huge,
Yes.
and then just taking like reasonable steps. So like okay, like you said, if you have like a liter of Coke a day, and you get maybe okay maybe you go to
Yep.
diet soda, or maybe you go to like something
A
else.
can. Yeah. Instead of
You
a full liter. Yep.
whether it's the portion size or you make a comparable swap, because obviously if you go
Yes.
from like having a pizza pie to some cauliflower like thing, maybe that's too big of a leap, but you just slowly chip away,
That's huge.
just like you don't start with like a 500-pound deadlift. If you're at 135, you go to
Yep.
140, you go to 145, and you just make these small
Yep.
progressions.
Yep.
And just like with the weight loss stuff, it's like you don't have to have these huge things. And then if you are kind of taking some supplements, or if you are taking some drugs with a doctor, make sure you're obviously monitoring it, of course.
Yep.
Um, but just realize that like 4 pounds a month, 5 pounds a month may not seem like a lot, but times that by 10, times that by
Yep.
12, and that might be the 50 pounds like there. If you kind of stick with it,
Yep.
it's going to be one of the thing that I keep kind of saying back and forth. I've had it on a couple of podcasts lately is like, this idea of like easy come, easy go. And I think that is very true with weight loss. Like you said, so if you lose 20 pounds in a month, it's
Yeah.
probably going to come back on just as fast. So
Yep.
I think that like that's something I've been kind of like almost like I don't
Yeah.
know, a mantra. It's just been something that's on my mind. It's just something that people can remember, like easy come. And I think most people
Yeah.
can get on board with that and kind of understand,
Mhm.
like, yeah, I want this now, but it's like okay, like if you make a deal with the devil, if you kind of like
Yep.
do some fad diet or whatever, just
Yeah.
realize that could come back on just as fast. So I think
Yep.
that is like a huge kind of thing, and it's hard to be patient. So one
Yeah.
of the things that's once you kind of know like where you want to be, and you start to kind of focus on these lifestyle things, it's not as like sexy as, like I said,
Mhm.
just taking a magic pill or going on
Yep.
a weird diet, but attacking these things kind of piece by piece and kind of make it like a lifestyle. Um,
Yes. That's
and
the best way to keep your New Year's goal alive, but not just your New Year's goal, like any goal, right? And you're hitting the nail right on the head. Easy come, easy go. I couldn't agree more. And that's why some of these medications I completely stay away from. I mean, there's a popular one out there called phentermine. It's usually only supposed to be for 30 days. I mean, what are you going to do for something for 30 days for? It's going to come back in another 30 days. So it's not worth it. You know what I mean? So yes, you want to be making these little changes week over week or month over month, whatever is palatable, because these little successes are what continue motivation. It's what helps discipline, right? Because now you're getting the positive reinforcement from your little win, and then it amounts to something that's going to last longer.
And I also wanted to not to pick on you specifically, but I think it's a good
Yeah.
point. You kind of mentioned that you're doing these 20-minute workouts, whereas someone
Yeah.
like in my world might like kind of scoff at that.
Yeah.
But this is something that like and I have these conversations. Some of one of our members in particular, who I don't want to embarrass him, but
Yeah.
one of our he was a longtime member. He's someone I trained for like well over 5 years, and he was somebody that was kind of like was not able to like get to the gym 3 to 4 times a week, which would be like that would be like your ideal person, right? Come three to four
Yeah.
times a week, that sort of thing.
Yep.
He would come like on average once or twice, but like he was consistent over years, and eventually he actually became an elite level power lifter. He competed at Arnold and all this stuff, and you would think like
Wow.
on paper, and also again, not to like again, that's why I'll just
Yeah.
leave it name out of it, but like very like base. If you kind of saw him, you'd be like, I can't believe this guy could squat and deadlift 600 pounds. Like like he just,
Yeah.
but with good training and
Yep.
consistency, like with what I would consider more like probably middle of the bell curve genetics, like nothing like spectacular, not bad, but like
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
your average guy. But over the course of like 5, 6, 7 years of training, and not like very often, but
Yeah.
consistent over time, like it wasn't like so this guy was like just kept kind of coming back, kept learning, kept getting better. And it took him a really long time to reach his goal, but he finally like made he made a lead, and
Yeah.
he was able to compete at a high level. And again, this is someone who's a dad and a family man and all this stuff.
Yep.
So I like to tell that story, and we have other people like it. Just because a lot of people like again, they think like they have to like kind of go full bore like out of the gate.
Yes.
And like you said, like 20 minutes is better than zero. And then like
Correct.
and then when that season of your life kind of changes, and like
Yep.
you have a little bit, then you can kind of get back to okay, like now like even with myself, I'm getting married, at the end of this year, and you know
Yeah.
like okay, like maybe I'll want to do another competition at some point, or maybe a more like exciting goal. But like for now, like I'm just
Yeah.
gonna like, check the box of like working out. I'm not gonna like not work out. I'm
Yeah.
gonna still like, and I'm still gonna kind of put a plan for myself. But maybe instead of doing like 10 sets of all these extra, maybe I'm gonna do 5 sets, or maybe I'm gonna do I'm gonna do a 45-minute workout instead of a 90-minute workout, and that's fine. Maybe
Yep.
I'm going to do 5,000 steps a day instead of 10,000 steps a day. Like, what is like a reasonable thing that you could do? But what's not a good idea is just like stopping completely. And one of the
Yeah.
things I like to also kind of leave people with, and again, it may sound a little harsh, but I think like taking a break is just quitting slowly.
Yeah.
So I kind of advise people to like
Yep.
adjust your pace, but don't stop. One of the things,
Yes.
I don't know if you ever heard this kind of analogy, but like, and I'm not a biologist, so I don't even know if it's true, but I think it's true. One of my old business coach used to say, like, you want to be like a shark. A shark like has to like keep swimming, or else it dies. It never like completely stops. Sometimes it smells blood in
Yeah.
the water, and you have seasons of your life where you're kind of like attacking, going quickly, and other times it's just circling and waiting for its next meal. But it never actually is at a standstill, because then I guess with the how
Yep.
oxygen and stuff, eventually the shark will die if it stops.
Yep.
So I'll leave you guys with this. You just want to be like the shark.
Yeah, I love it. I love it because I'm on the same exact page. You ask any of my patients, it's all about activity, right? And that's why we do components of the pain management, because I'm like, listen, I don't want you to say, oh, Justin, I missed the day at the gym because my shoulder was bothering me a little bit or my back was a little tight. I'm taking those excuses off the table, right? Because doing something is better than doing nothing when it comes to activity level. Even if it's just a simple walk outside at a good pace. It's better than sitting on the couch, eating something you shouldn't be. It's getting you active. So we're on the same exact page. I agree. I think it's a great place to end, because if there's one thing you take home, it's get up, be active, do something that's going to get your body moving for sure.
Awesome, man. So I
Yeah.
know, like, where can people find you if you want to, plug your website or your,
Yeah,
social?
yeah, of course. We're going to make sure that we have everything over, but coastalmdli.com. We're about to be opening up our fourth office actually out in Riverhead on the East End. And we're setting our sights on Nassau County as well. But within the next month or two, we're actually going to be taking telehealth patients, which is going to be huge. So, definitely reach out to us. You could email us on our website, info@coastalmdli.com, or please call our office, 631-343-4184, and our team will take care of everything for you. And lean on me as a resource too. So I'll make sure that we get you my email, my work email, and if people have questions, feel free to shoot me an email, and I'm more than happy to take the time to answer any questions about this or anything else they might have.
Awesome. Well, it's always fun chatting with you and catching up,
Yep.
and I'm sure we'll definitely be at this again. If you
Yep.
guys found this podcast helpful, please share it. Please give it a 5-star review. It helps other people find us. Thank you guys so much for listening. Until next time, stay strong, and we'll see you soon.